Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. We have a cool new brand to feature for you guys called EONIQ Atelier. And they are the sister brand to the DIY Watch Club, leveraging their hand-assembled expertise into more premium offerings. Every timepiece is hand-assembled, regulated, and QC'd by an individual watchmaker, which I think is pretty impressive. Now, in terms of type of watch, this is an everyday watch. Some key characteristics and design language when you think about, actually, well, I'd say even specifies and skews more into the everyday dress watch, which those key characteristics and dress and design language would be more so within the realm of clean, classic, minimalist design, and of course sensibly sized. This is known as their Malbec, and this is the specific variation of the traditional Chinese font. It is also available in a standard Breguet style numeral setup, which is also very handsome, but I felt that it was kind of iconic for them to go with the Chinese there. I think it's really cool, and again, something different, although the Breguet style is also quite handsome. Now, this is EONIQ's first watch, celebrating 10 years of watchmaking experience leading up to their launch. It does, feature fine watchmaking details such as pad printed sector dial, as well as heat blued hands and screws. Also, affordability wise, right in that DIY Watch Club range. I mean, of course, a bit elevated, but still, I think quite attainable at $690 direct. Now, this sample was kindly provided by the brand for the purposes of this review, but no brand ever has any editorial input on the review, and all thoughts and feedback are always my own. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, now, as you can see, some of you have probably already noticed, if you've seen this watch pop up online, that I do have it on an aftermarket beads of rice bracelet from Forstner. This is their 9-row, which I reviewed recently, but I thought it was a nice pairing here. I still will cover the OEM strap options, of course, but I did want to highlight it in a way that I actually do wear the watch. I think a lot of times we kind of get in a rush to get content out there and maybe don't necessarily add as much additional value. And in this case, me being a bracelet guy, I wear it on a bracelet, and so that's how I'm going to showcase it, and that's how I'm going to give the feedback based on that. But again, of course, I will get the straps out here for more details. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the dimensions. 38.5 millimeters in diameter, a nice thin 8.6 millimeters thick there, and then 45.2 millimeters lug to lug. Of course, that is from my own caliper measurements. Now, it is going to be fully polished 316L stainless steel. It does have a flat sapphire with an inner anti-reflective coating, and you can see it is really quite beautiful. And just because it's all polished doesn't mean it doesn't have any of these extra details on the case. So let me just give it a quick wipe here. It's a warm Saturday at the time of filming this here in sunny Southern California. So check that out. Really nice. There is, of course, still some beveling work there. Again, just a bit smudgy from the heat there, but it's doesn't have the high contrast. I think that would have been nice to get it brushed and polished, but of course, those things increase cost, especially in a piece like this that is going to be generally meant to be more dressy. Also, of course, a nice thin fixed bezel in terms of the proportions, very open dial for such a small diameter at 38.5. I feel like 38.5 is actually a real sweet spot for this type of watch, but if you do have a larger wrist and kind of might shy away from anything underneath 40, I will say with the expansive dial, you're going to get a lot more wrist presence. Also, the fact that it's very thin is going to make it feel a lot wider proportionally. Now, in terms of the crown, it's unsigned, but it is a push-pull crown, so no screw down, which means you can expect 30 atmospheres of or 30, I should say 3 atmospheres or 30 meters of water resistance here. Again, within line for that kind of everyday dress watch status. It would have been nice if it would have been 100, but also we always get upset when a watch is over 10 millimeters thick, and hey, this one is thinner, and I think it follows the theme of the watch and doesn't feel out of place being a 3 atmosphere water resistance watch. Now, the movement inside is a cool one. Of course, you saw no date on the dial. This is a no date movement. And check it out there. Very nice. It's actually a Miyota automatic movement, the 9039, which we featured on the channel many times. 42-hour power reserve, 4 hertz or 28,800 vibration per hour beat rate there. And it does have also a nice custom skeletonized rotor as well as custom blued screws, which I think really amp up the look there. So very cool. And again, not for everyone, but there's plenty of people who enjoy a good display case back of, on a finely executed movement. No, it's not ultra complex or anything like that, but it is finished to a very high level, which I think many people can appreciate, to include myself, especially through that display case back. Now, getting into the dial here, you get that dual finish there. You got the matte, of course, silver tones, and then you have the brushed silver sector style dial, right, which is really, really nice. No date, so extremely well balanced. You get that pad printed index, so if I could ever get in close enough, you can even see with the light shimmering off there that it does have a 3D effect there. So very, very cool in terms of the thickness that's applied, which just helps it feel like it's, again, it has that extra level of, hand touches to it, right? Where it doesn't just feel like something that was, more industrially stamped out. There's somebody that's running the hand crank, popping it down, redipping, reapplying, and everything like that. So I don't know. For me, that was an absolute plus, and I think it is accentuated quite well in this choice of font. Now, also, you're going to get polished and blued hands, which blued hands are tough to pick up on camera because, of course, typically in the studio, I'm recording in a completely dark room with just, 2 light resources off to the left and right of the frame. And then it's reflecting directly off of what? A black camera lens, right? Like if you look at camera lens, it's a bunch of glass, it's dark, so it's hard to get those reflections to really see the blue highlighted. So what I might even try to do, which I've never done this before, but you guys know when I do the low light transition, maybe I'll just, check it out. Let's do that. Get a little, it just washes out a little bit too much, but hopefully you guys are getting an idea there of the level of just consistency in the bluing. It's not like it's coated or anything like that. And of course, out in normal daylight, it's going to be really, really nice and pop. But then in darker situations, right, where you might want it to be more subdued, very easily subdued and quite classy and classical. And if, of course, you are a fan of, watchmaking, those little details are going to be the ones that you're going to gravitate towards. I already went over the water resistance, guys. Getting into the lug width, 20 millimeters, which make it a great option for aftermarket straps as well as bracelets, as you guys can see here. But before we get into the aftermarket bracelet, let's talk about, since it's a new brand, check it out. This is the packaging that it comes inside. Of course, there's some outer travel boxes and whatnot, sleeves to keep all this a little bit more pristine. But this is essentially what you get. And I think it's pretty nice, nicely branded. You guys can see here, very clean stitching, nice zip. And let's see what comes in the package. Check it out. So you have 2 different strap options, and they are different, right? It's not like they're just 2 different colors. They're actually 2 different straps. So we'll start with the black one here. You guys can see, we'll pop this out. Nice snaps that engage quite easily. And let's check it out. So this one is going to actually have a flat profile. And then in terms of the style, so there's no padding on this one. And then you also do get the specialized buckle here where it has an integrated initial keeper. Instead of having a fixed keeper right there, it's there so that when you use this, right, when it goes through, you're gonna go wham, bam, through, nicely integrated. Then of course you have the sliding keeper depending on how long or short the extra tail is going to be. So I think that's really nice. High polish there. I like that they went with 2 different styles, not just 2 different colors. Even the holes are different, right? So you have rounded holes here on the black model. You can see the underside. I do like this strap setup. I might even just keep it like that. It's a little short for my 7.5-inch wrist, but at least this strap was. But you know, again, I do have slightly larger wrists. Then for the brown, which is quite nice, but you can see different because it's padded, so it's not only going to taper from here down, it's also going to taper from here down to the thin part, which is nice because you do get a little bit extra structure there in terms of stability on the wrist. But for such a thin watch, not necessarily a big deal. Still nicely executed. More standard pin buckle here, brushed. You have more standard fixed keeper, more standard floating keeper, but overall this is a really nice looking one. That actually, both of these taper the same way, so just 2 millimeters down to about 18 millimeters. But yeah, I just did want to showcase that for you, and you can see these are pretty easy peasy to put away. Just get everything underneath here and there, and yeah, it's a really cool look when it comes to design wise. How handsome this whole setup is. I think this is really cool. If you keep your watch in there, of course, then even better, and you have something to travel with. But with all that said, let's actually now get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you guys can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, or 19 centimeters in circumference, I think this wears really, really well. A bit more bold visually because of that more open dial layout, but again, the actual footprint is quite small at just 38.5 millimeters, and look at how thin it is. My goodness, I mean, they could have easily had that integrated to the name. They could have called this a slimline watch because of how thin it is. But I love that it's just kind of an extra selling point. I mean, not only is it thin, but it's beautifully sculpted. Look at the lugs there. Look at the undercutting done on the side, so you even get a thinner mid case. And then, of course, you get that little protrusion on the case back, but it does sink into the wrist quite well. And you can see organically flows. I think this Forstner 9-row beads of rice stainless steel bracelet looks outstanding. It's 18 millimeters wide across the links, non-tapering, and I think it does suit the aesthetic quite well and make it, for me anyway, a little bit more daily wearable. Of course, on a strap, it's going to look better, probably peeking out from underneath the cuff, but I will say on this bracelet peeking out from underneath the cuff, it gives it even a bit more, I think, of an elevated feel, a little bit more purposeful, a little bit more pizzazz there, which, you know, hey, who doesn't want that, especially when you're choosing a watch to stand out on the wrist, while kind of combining all of those lovely familiarities of common design aesthetics, while injecting it with some really fun new details. So I think this looks great. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to notice that it makes the watch case look much larger. It's because really what's closer to it seems a lot larger, and then my wrist starts falling away. Then you're seeing less of the bracelet. It just looks like it's oversized now, but we'll keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as how this may lay on your own wrist. And look at that, a lot more nicely centered. Again, really nice sweet spot for daily wear. I do like this watch, and if you guys are fans of the channel, you've noticed I've slowly started opening up more and more towards dressy watches. I'm a huge diver guy. You know, I love divers, field watches, flight watches, right, pilots watches, all of the air, land, and sea. When it comes to these, you know, I'm starting to have a greater appreciation for them. Maybe it's because I'm getting a little bit older, and maybe I'm a little bit more, buttoned up than I have been in the past. So I don't mind dressing up a bit more. But I think even juxtaposed against casual wear, stuff like this is very classic. This white t-shirt, blue jeans, this is something that I think is going to be a great accessory that pops. Doesn't just disappear. I mean, it might disappear on the wrist comfort-wise, but it's not going to disappear aesthetically. I think it's something that's really going to stand out and, you know, be a great conversation piece apart from just a great timepiece. So with that said, let's get this off the wrist set up for some, well, not loom shots, but definitely low light transition and closing thoughts. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Again, not going to go fully dark. Well, I mean, I guess we kind of can. There's a little bit of light peeking through, but there's no loom. But of course, as a dedicated dress watch, even though it is, I think, aesthetically pleasing enough to be worn every day. I think it's fine that it doesn't have lume, and probably would be kind of ruined by even putting small lume plops on there or trying to lume the handset. Oh, look at this thing. But I do like to work in that low light transition because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree, guys. So, why not take a look at how these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. You guys already saw the goods when it came to the lighting, during the standard portions of the review. So yeah, I like to get it in here so you guys can get an idea of how this thing's going to play, how it's going to dance, how dynamic or dull it can be. And I think this is going to be a very nice dynamic example. The sector styling, beautifully done. And I think, of course, again, adding that 9-row beads of rice, you could add a, mesh bracelet or something like that as well. And I think it would also do a similar effect where it just elongates this dial, this beautiful, metal piece of just action. And then now you're going to have it wrapping around your wrist and, just displaying something and telling a story, and I think that's cool. So I do like this a whole lot. Again, no lume to report, but you can see even in transitional lighting, there's going to be times in poor lighting where all you need is a little bit of ambient light and it's still really quite legible. And then even under bright lights here, it's rarely going to wash out in terms of that. Yeah, so here we go. All right, guys, so closing thoughts: on wrist, thin and balanced with nice visual proportions and details that pop even at just a glance. I like that. I like that it's something that can stand out, but it's not shouting again. Like, it's not blinged out. There's not a lot to it, even though the case is high polished. It's a really thin case. So it's not like it's not like a Grand Seiko where there's all these reflective facets. This is just a very, classical layout, but it's not boring. They could have went with a more boring case architecture. They could have went with a more boring dial architecture. They went with something that had fine details, and they paid very close attention to executing those fine details. In terms of model variants, do check the site links for current options and availability. I think they're of course, they're sister brand to the DIY Watch Club, so not surprising that they're constantly working on different customizations you can do in terms of the numerals. And then, for right now, this is now which has been a previous kind of, hey, you can just ask us for this and we'll make it. Now you can straight add this to cart, which is very cool. And I'm sure that there's future, font face types that they would be able to make optional in the future, depending on how popular the requests are. So do check that out. If you want to see how this looks, of course, on one of the OEM straps, there's pictures in the links, as well as, across YouTube in terms of other reviewers' coverages. In terms of comparable models, guys, elevated well above your typical microbrand sector dial homage. It's just facts. Most of the sector dials that are out there are just going to be straight homages to very handsome JLC sectors and Omega sector dials and historical sectors and everything like that. And that's fine. They're just a cheaper variation of something already existing. Whereas this went out of the way to be, I think, a little bit more thoughtful and purposeful and deliberate in its design, execution, and language, where they really just wanted to make something that looked great. And I think market position wise, again, elevated above that typical microbrand sector dial homage, while still vastly undercutting watches like the Longines Heritage Sector Dial. Those are in the range of $2,750 to $2,950, almost $3,000 for a simple, watch. Essentially, it's not like it's high complication. It's not like it's high water resistance or anything like that. So I think compared to those two, of course, Longines has been around for a long time. It's, it has the oldest registered logo in watchmaking, or at least in Swiss watchmaking. So it's a cool brand. I love those watches. I've reviewed those watches. I've reviewed Omega Sector Dials. I'm a big fan. I've reviewed a ton of cheap Homage Sector Dials, and yeah, I think the way this sits is definitely leaning more towards the high end stuff, just without the high end pricing. So I think that's cool. So for me, guys, bottom line, the Malbec is an impressive offering from an established watchmaking team from within the enthusiast market. Like this isn't just some Kickstarter campaign, right? This is a passion project from a group that has already been quite successful, that does have, regular interactions with their customers and customer service, and they are clearly highlighting that unique skill set. So if you're looking for like the cheapest kind of quote unquote good enough type of sector dial, then this isn't the watch for you. I really think EONIQ Atelier, I have to like make sure I say that right. EONIQ Atelier. My brain wants to like say it more phonetically than the way that it's read. I think they're just they're offering an elevated piece of really finely executed details. I think that will really speak to the enthusiast market. This is not necessarily something to where it's like, oh, just like anybody off the streets will see why this is a great $690 watch. But in the right groups, the right friend circles, I think this is definitely something that's really cool. And then I think even for the casual folks out there, like maybe you buy this as a gift for your dad who, and he somewhat likes watches, or, dads and grads, maybe somebody just graduated your son or daughter or something like that. Because I think it's still good enough to be unisex in terms of sizing. I think there's enough fine details where they'd be able to appreciate it. But I mean, at the same time, non-enthusiasts will be pretty impressed with a lot of the stuff that's out there. I mean, they enjoy a good Timex. So it's not hard to impress them. But I will say again, even more jaded collectors are going to see something like this, read the story behind it, enjoy the details associated with the piece in the metal. And I think, it's just ultimately you're going to get a lot more return on that emotional investment. So let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please like, and if you're any, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.